farmers have been protesting against 3 new agriculture liberalization laws introduced by the central government in September 2020. As we know, agriculture is the backbone of the Indian economy, employing well over 50, some people estimate almost 70% of the working population. Now, over 1 million farmers from the states of Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and elsewhere have arrived and are attempting to arrive and are being blocked in the capital, in tractors, in trucks, and are on foot. Braving the very harsh winter cold of Delhi, farmers have established makeshift camps in the outskirts of the city and have vowed not to leave until these acts are repealed. They are being supported by another 250 million people within the country and, in fact, worldwide. This protest is about an agri-food system that is simply not working for the people. Now, to talk about this agri-food system, particularly in the Indian context, today in this special webinar, we are joined by Dr. Ramanjaneyulu, whom I'm going to refer to as Ramu, who is the head of the Center for Sustainable Agriculture India, and Devinder Sharma, who is a scientist and agri-food policy expert. Now, behind the scenes here, we have Vinyasa from CSA, who is handling the tech and is a total star in how she has organized things in such a short time frame. Thank you so much, Vinyasa. Could I please ask audience members to kindly use the chat function to ask any questions? We will try to cover the questions that you have already put in your registration form. Just to also say that you can use the chat function to keep on bringing in more questions if you want. Now, I just want to introduce our panelists for a moment. So, Devinder Sharma ji is a distinguished food and trade policy analyst. I have known him for 20 years because he was one of the first analysts to critically analyze the role of trade agreements in entrenching our neoliberal corporate food regime. And we're going to talk about this. What does this term neoliberal corporate food regime mean? Devinder ji is an award-winning Indian journalist. He's a writer, thinker, researcher, and he's well known for his work, particularly in the area of trade and food security. So he's trained as a scientist. He knows the science completely. He's trained in plant breeding and genetics. He was with the Indian Express for a long time. Then he started to, he's quit journalism and working on policy issues related to sustainable agriculture, biodiversity, intellectual property rights, environment, and the list goes on and on. But hunger, looking at hunger and looking at implications of free trade policies and agreements for developing countries. So many regard him as singularly responsible for deciphering the complex global treaties and agreements and what these mean for developing countries in a way in which we can understand. He is on the boards of many, many different institutions. He's been a visiting fellow at very many different universities, including the University of Cambridge, and the popular Indian magazine The Week, in its Independent Day special issue, which was dated August 16, 2009, has listed Devinder ji amongst the 25 most valuable Indians, calling him the Green Chomsky after Noam Chomsky. So that's quite an honor. He is associated, as I said, associated with many different organizations, including CSA. So, a very warm welcome to you and thank you for joining us. Let's move on to Ramu. Ramu is also a scientist. He has a PhD in agricultural extension from the Indian Agricultural Research Institution, New Delhi. And for a long time, he worked for the Indian Council for Agricultural Research. Ramu then established CSA Center for Sustainable Agriculture, which currently works across 8 states and counting. CSA is a remarkable organization that I have known for 5 years. They work at the local level, largely with small and marginal farmers in sustainable and equitable agriculture. They are one of the organizations that pioneered something known as non-pesticidal management agriculture, something that Ramu will explain to us today. Why is this so important? They also work closely with local government. So, for example, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, CSA worked with the state in designing and in implementing community managed sustainable agriculture. And this spread to over 1,500 villages, covering 35 lakh hectares, covering 18 districts. Now, this is much, much larger today. I'm talking just about from 2005 to 2008. Today, CSA's outreach is to 50,000 farmers across the country. They work with 300 farmer producer organizations, and they have 5,000 farmers who have registered for a farmer-led organic certification system known as PGS, Participatory Guarantee System. CSA has won many, many awards. They have also won the Rural Innovation Awards in Bihar 2014, World Bank Marketplace Awards 2005, 2 awards in 2019, for all sorts of achievements in community development. And this is because they do genuinely go out there and work with communities. And I have, as I said, been involved with them for 5 years and have visited their communities and their farmers and worked with them quite closely. They have also got an initiative called Grameen Academy, which is creating an alternative learning ecosystem to build new knowledge. And you can read more about this on their website. So I'm going to begin just by sharing a few slides before I ask our speakers to explain the issue to us. I'm just going to share a couple of slides that I have. So just bear with me, please. Okay, so I want to start off with why is this happening today? And for that, we're giving a little bit of background. Professor Philip McMichael talks about the current food regime being the corporate food regime of industrial and transgenic agriculture. What do we mean by industrial agriculture? What does this term mean? This term refers to the modern form of capital-intensive agriculture in which machinery reduces or replaces the need for labor of human beings and animals. It entails the cultivation of high-yielding plant varieties or genetically modified varieties, something again that our speakers will explain to us. What do these terms mean, as opposed to traditional or locally developed varieties? So remember, seeds there are very important. And these varieties are heavily reliant on pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, and irrigated water. Very important to remember now when we think of the state of Punjab, Western UP, etc. The speakers will shortly explain to us what the green and green revolutions were all about, because these are what entrenched industrial agriculture in India. All right. Now, this industrial agriculture is very concentrated. These are the latest figures coming out in 1990 in a paper that was published this year. Look at agrochemicals. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 companies controlling 65.8% of the global market. Here we have ChemChina, state-controlled seed company. Okay, so you have big multinationals from China, some of them state-controlled, also getting into the game. Animal pharma. Again, you see a company like Merck, which is very much in, it's a big pharmaceutical company, not just for human pharmaceuticals, but also for animal pharmaceuticals. Commercial seeds, you see ChemChina there. Bayer has now bought out Monsanto. Look at their market there. All right, so they control 53% of the global market. So we call it free trade, but actually it is very carefully controlled trade in, it's there to support just a few big capital players. Here's one commodity, beer. Again, you see a few corporations there, and then farm equipment. Moving on. This is just to give you a bit of an idea of the seed industry. So you have Bayer, BASF, ChemChina, and Corteva, which are seed and chemical companies. So they sell you the seed. With that seed, they sell you the chemicals. In many countries, these are provided by the state. Increasingly, they're becoming privatized, and they are very, very expensive for farmers, particularly small and marginal farmers. Then we have a new phenomena, which has become not so new, but to understand financialization of global agriculture. Those companies that have never been involved in agriculture, never grown anything, don't know anything about agriculture, are investing in a very big way in agriculture. And so we have these funds, investment funds, that are going out and buying huge shares in these agricultural companies. Okay, you ask yourself why? Because they have financialized agriculture. It is sold as a commodity on world markets. And then the latest trend now we have, it's growing, which is global agri-food and the big data platform. So what is big data? It is about the ability to gather, to analyze, and to reinterpret vast amounts of data, both old and real time, which means to extract commercially relevant information. In the industrial food system, this could include information on weather, historic weather conditions, market prices, yields, soils, pests, weeds, etc. Now, if you actually look at what's going on, what happens is that the Canadian group ETC, Erosion Technology and Concentration, say that the big deal about big data platform is that the technology suddenly shifts the commercial advantage to the companies that have the most data. So like what we saw with Cambridge Analytica and what they did during the 2016 American elections, they were mining our Facebook data. This way, if a farmer has got a mobile phone and they download an app on controlling weeds or something like that, which is sold by a big corporation, they are selling their data, giving their data to that corporation. The consequences are extraordinary. You have companies like Alibaba and Google, which are advising Chinese farmers on how to breed pigs and on markets. Amazon is not just delivering food, but buying grocery chains. Okay, global farm machinery companies are using their storehouse of field data to team up with newly merged seed companies such as Bayer. And at the other end of the food chain, Walmart, Unilever, Nestle, they are using their very big data to slide along the chain and negotiate directly with farmers. This is a direct quote from ETC. So big data leads to more concentration because now it is information which is becoming so important. All right. Now, this is very, very important in the context of this webinar. I just want to turn now to corporate wealth is increasing. Indian wealth is also increasing. So according to a report by Oxfam, we have a situation where the bottom 50% of the population owns 2.8% of the wealth. The top 1% of the population earns 4 times more than what 70% of the population owns. So the disparity is so huge. This is why we're having farmer protests. People have had enough. They have reached what I call an inflection point. Farmers grow our food, and yet they are the most food insecure people in the world. This is a global phenomenon. It is not just an Indian phenomena or a phenomenon from Punjab. Farmers all over the world are suffering like this, the most food insecure, the most hungry, because of the way the system is structured. So this is what the seminar is about today. So just in a word, Ramu, I would like to start with you, please. I'd like you to start off with explaining to us the farm protests, and then just to take us back and just tell us what the Green Revolution was and link that to those protests, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Jagjit, for putting the entire thing in a very good context from a macro perspective. In the last 70 years in India, the government took a path. We'll invest in one area, we'll invest in high input agriculture and put in all our resources there and then grow an agriculture model. And that's exactly what has happened in this country. So all resources were pooled in, and then very high intensive model of agriculture was tried out in few locations. And when they tried to replicate the whole process without extending the support systems, the same model of agriculture which was tried out in small few locations, say 7-8 districts in the country where they started as a Green Revolution, is extended across the country. And when they tried out the Green Revolution model in Punjab or in West Godavari or in Tanjavur, in Tamil Nadu, government has put in a lot of support systems. Say there was a procurement system created, there's a banks which were created to extend loans, there is a seed corporations created, agriculture research system created, extension system created. If you look at the whole range of support systems which are required to make this happen, were created and then borne by the government. But gradually after 60s, when they started, after 70s and 80s, when they started expanding to other locations, they simply wanted farmers to bear all these things and then get into adopt all these practices, but without providing any of these support systems. So that's where actually the crisis started. So we wanted Punjab model to be adopted in, say, Odisha or Chhattisgarh or in Anantapur, which is the driest belt of Andhra Pradesh. And we want them to adopt those practices, make the shift without creating any of these support systems. So the whole failure of these support systems is what has led to the whole crisis. And the way the crisis today in India, the average income of the farmers, I think Devinder will put it in a much more better perspective. The average income of the farmers is just around 96,000 rupees per annum. And if you're talking about average 96,000 rupees, you can see the variances across the country. There are few states where the average income is more than 2.5 lakh rupees. So obviously there are many states where the average income is less than 30,000 rupees per annum. So that's a kind of situation. That's what is leading to a situation where many of the small and marginal farmers are leaving farming and then becoming agricultural workers. So today, the last census, 2011 census, if you have seen, more people shifted from farming to from a cultivator status to labor status. That's the situation in which people are. And there's an increasing cost of production, significant increase of cost of production because of dependency on external inputs, and the subsidies of the government are only for a particular few crops and then few products, so few models of production. So these are all going towards very few states even. So if you look at the total public money which is spent in this country, some states get say on average per hectare 30,000 rupees per hectare as subsidy. There are states which get 300 rupees per hectare as subsidy. So that's the situation. And the entire support systems also created the same distortion. Say in some states when there is a 95% procurement, in some states there is a less than 5% procurement of the production. So that's the distortions which are being created. So while people were trying to struggle with these distortions, after 95 when the liberalization began, so till 95, it was only the struggle internally happening. But post 95, you also have to struggle with the international businesses and all. So on one hand, there was a concentration happening, government withdrawal from the support systems, and then agriculture crisis began. So that's the background. And there's more than 3.5 lakh farmer suicides which are recorded in this country. And if you look at indebtedness, it is increasing day by day. Incomes are going down. That's the situation. And every year we are seeing protests from one part or the other across the country. So we need to figure out why this entire crisis is coming in and then what kind of solutions we need. So the current bills is a trigger. So our solutions also should not stop at this. We should look at the larger thing. So this should be a point where we need to start dialogue on the whole thing. So if our demands gets restricted to small one or two issues, we end up again doing the same mistake which government was doing for a longer time. This is what I would say. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ramu. So as we have heard, we had the introduction of the Green Revolution in the 1960s, and the Green Revolution, as I explained to you, was all about the use of high-yielding varieties, but these varieties required a lot of external inputs. One of the things was that it was given the different endowments across the country, like Punjab had irrigation facilities and all. The Green Revolution, somebody's asked this question, it went India-wide, but as Ramu has explained, in some states, the government procures almost 96% of what is grown. In other states, it doesn't. It procures much less. So the Green Revolution was about our first step in India moving towards industrial agriculture. Devinder ji, we had the Green Revolution. Then we moved to the Gene Revolution. And please, could you just tell us what the Green Revolution was? You could also tell us a little bit more about the Green Revolution, particularly with regard to what happened in those northern states, western states of India, and what the Green Revolution has entailed, and in whose interests it has worked.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Jagjit, for inviting me. And I think it's always a pleasure to talk about agriculture and the agrarian crisis, given the present hot issue that India faces. What you said is very important to understand, because when Green Revolution came in the 1960s, mid 1960s, I think Indian policymakers, I would say, did a remarkable job in bringing up two planks of policy structures, which I think were very crucial, and which M.S. Swaminathan had once called it as famine avoidance strategy. That was when you increase production, and when you have a huge volume at the time of harvest flowing in, the prices crash. It is a tradition we know all over the world. Historically, it is what existed everywhere. And so to ensure that, what the government did was they set up what is called as Food Corporation of India, which would mop up the entire volume, and then of course distribute it to the deficit areas by way of public distribution system to address that issue of hunger. The second part was that when the farmers, when the prices crash, they don't have an incentive to go for the same cultivation or the same crop next year. So to ensure that they do not, walk away from that particular crop, wheat and rice, staple food, they ensured, or they brought in a system of bringing in or ensuring a minimum support price for those particular crops, two crops essentially, wheat and rice. So the idea was that if let the trade first step in the markets, which were regulated mandis called APMC markets, and then in that condition, if the prices fall or nobody is able to procure at that particular level that the government has announced, which is the minimum support price that the farmer needs to get to stay on into cultivation, they brought in minimum support price. So the government will purchase, or the FCI, Food Corporation of India, will purchase, whatever is in the mandi or in the markets at the MSP. Now that system worked very well in Punjab, and in fact, the Green Revolution is an outcome of these two policies essentially. If these two policies were not existing, I don't think technology could have done what it claims to do now, or could have succeeded in the manner that we could call it a Green Revolution. Now in Punjab today, roughly about 99% of paddy is procured. Because this means this is a cash crop for farmers, and farmers, because in Punjab it is not a tradition to, they are rice eaters. So 99% of paddy is procured. And as far as wheat is concerned, these two, if you follow this cropping pattern, wheat and rice, then about 75 to 80% of wheat is procured in Punjab every year. Now, this is an open-ended procurement system we have in Punjab and Haryana, where essentially the APMC mandis are set up more, and or let's say predominantly, this is the belt where most of these mandis exist. Now, over the decades, what has happened in Punjab is that we have a huge network of APMC markets laid out. And successive governments have also built infrastructure linking the markets with the villages. So we have a huge network of village link roads in Punjab, which would take you to those mandis. So make it very convenient for the farmers. Now that is a system which has been laid out over the decades, and it is a system which has worked very well over the decades. And similarly in Haryana, and as we all know that in India, we have about 7,000 APMC markets, or mandis as we call it in India. Whereas if we need a mandi at 5-kilometer radius for the farmers, we would need about 42,000 mandis in India, which successive governments have failed to provide infrastructure for, or create an infrastructure for. Now, in this condition, there has been for many years now, since beginning of 2003, various attempts to amend these APMC laws, because the economic thinking is that APMC regulated mandis and the minimum support price is coming in the way of price discovery. So APMC has to be dismantled, MSP has to be done away with, and then let markets operate, and markets would do wonders, provide farmers with what is called as price discovery. And in fact, it is claimed, and it is by that lobby of market economists who try to convince that nothing will work, or we will be left to or saddled with huge surplus that we don't know what to do with it. Right now, India has a huge surplus of wheat and paddy, and so the blame is being shifted to Punjab farmers as if they are responsible for the surplus. But ironically, what is not being mentioned is that India is also carrying a burden of, or let's say, hungry population of about 200 million plus. And we were a year before in the Global Hunger Index, our ranking was 102 out of 119 countries. So in that situation, it tells us that, if the surplus is there, it is what somebody had called some years back as hunger surplus. If you don't feed your people, this is how you build up your surplus. Then you can also export out of that and so on, which is again an issue with WTO. WTO is objecting to this, that, if you buy at MSP, and that price, that food is then, or that grain is then sold in the international markets, that distorts global trade. So there is a pressure on India globally also to do away with the minimum support price. And they have, as you know, under the WTO, there is something called as a AMS specification, which means that you cannot exceed 10%. Developing countries cannot exceed 10% of support to their farmers by way of prices of the volume, total volume. Let's say if we produce 100 million tons of wheat in this country, then then you take the value out of it. Of that value, you can only provide 10%. So the maximum limit they have ascribed is 10%. You cannot exceed that. India, as many countries in WTO who have now taken India for disputes, are saying that India is providing roughly about 60 to 80% AMS, or the direct support to farmers, which of course is being challenged there. And the second part is that this is also being exported, so which means you are globally distorting trade. So there is a pressure from international, but there is also a pressure domestically, autonomous pressure, I would say, for last several years. So 2003, 2007, 2013, 2017, we have seen laws being amended in various states and so on to ensure that APMC is dismantled. Now, this has gone on, and farmers understand. It is not that the farmers are foolish, that they don't understand what is happening. Over the decades, they have followed this very clearly, especially in Punjab and Haryana, because that is where majority farmers in India get minimum support price. As Shanta Kumar Committee, a high-powered committee some years back, had said that only 6% farmers in India get minimum support price. 94% farmers are in any case dependent on markets. Now, if the markets were so wonderful, so benevolent, so kind, I'm sure you will agree that the distress that Ramu detailed out with 3.64 lakh farmers committing suicide in the last 25 years wouldn't have happened. If the markets were so good. Now, the fact of the matter is that markets everywhere in the world, let's be very clear, and I make this categorically clear, that everywhere in the world, markets have actually done damage to farmers, whether it is America, whether it is Europe, whether it is Australia, and so on. Or it's the OECD countries that we all talk about. Now, given this condition, to blindly follow or to borrow a model from a failed model from America and Europe, and then cut and paste and adopt it and push it as a reform in India, I think is going to be very detrimental, and farmers understand the implication. Also, the point that over the years, agriculture has been deliberately kept impoverished by successive governments, because the economic design is to push people out of farming into the urban areas. In fact, one of our governors of the Reserve Bank of India used to say that the biggest ticket reforms would be when you move farmers out of agriculture into the urban areas, because urban areas need cheap labor, which means the Hardi Mazdoor. If the Hardi Mazdoor, creation of the Hardi Mazdoor is what is economic growth, I think we need to take an entire relook at what economic design is all about. Now, the point is that at this particular stage, farmers have felt the pinch over the last several decades. I'll just give you a couple of statistics to drive home this point. There was an UNTAD, internationally United Nations report, I remember vaguely. It was from mid-1980s to mid-2000. let's say around 1985 to around 2005, it said the output price or the farm gate price of agriculture commodities had remained frozen all over the world if you adjust for inflation. Now that opened up my eyes when I looked at it, that imagine for 20 years, people will getting almost the same price. And then there is a study by OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, along with a think tank in Delhi called ICRIA. And they said that between the year 2000 and 2016-17, which means 16 years, Indian farmers lost 45 lakh crore. Every year, they were losing 2.64 lakh crore every year. And this, I thought, was an extraordinary crisis, but it was never even a headline in the newspapers or in the media that, this is a kind of a crisis that had hit Indian agriculture. And this, I think, is an underestimate because the analysis is based on about a handful of crops. It doesn't cover the entire spectrum of agriculture. Now, this was a huge crisis that between 2000 and 2016-17. And then there is a Niti Aayog, the Indian policy think tank, which has said that between 2011-12 and 2015-16, it estimated that the real income, farm income in India had grown by less than 0.5% every year, 0.44% to be exact. And then for the next 2 years, it said that the growth in real farm income in India is almost zero, quote unquote, almost zero. So it tells you clearly that for the last 4 decades, Indian farmers have been at the receiving end. And Indian farmers, obviously, this simmering discontent that was brewing all these years, it was building up, and eventually it finds a vent, it finds an outlet now through this opposition to the central laws that we see, because enough is enough, as Jagjit said at some stage, enough is enough. Farmers feel that, these laws coming in will make them disappear or will force them out of agriculture and so on and so forth. So this is what has built up to the anger on the streets in India. And primarily it is because of the income insecurity that they feel they're going to face in the years to come, although they have lived with income insecurity all these decades. But I think, as I re-emphasize it again, enough is enough.
Thank you so much. I'm just now going to share my screen again. Devinderji, thank you so much for that, because you're giving us the background of 4 decades of what's been going on in Indian agriculture. Okay, now these are the 3 laws, right? So I'm going to keep this screen on for just a moment because I want us, from what we understand, these laws have to be understood together. We can't go one by, they're each doing different things, but they have to be looked at together. So number 1, Farmers, Produce, Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act. Now, if you read the words, they are actually quite, the way they are worded is, we're doing this for farmers. It is to promote and to facilitate their produce, right? What they produce. Second law, Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act. Very interesting. They want to empower and protect them and give them price assurance. Law number 3, the Essential Commodities Act. Now here you think even this one is a very important act. In fact, what they've done is removed certain commodities from there. But let's start with Ramu. Ramu, can you please just take us through these acts and tell us what they are doing? And then Devinderji, you can also please explain to us what these 3 acts are about. So Ramu.
You have to unmute yourself, sir.
Yeah, sorry. So the core objective of this Farm Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion Facilitation Act 2020 is about relaxing the restrictions on governing purchase and sale of farm produce in this country. And government's claim is that this will make the farmers sell their produce anywhere. And the fear is that the APMCs which are being established will be dismantled, and then that may have an effect on the farmers. So that's where actually the first law stays. I'll come to that, what it means to the farmers. Second is the Farmers Empowerment Protection Agreement on Price Assurances and Farm Services Act is a dedicated legislation to enable contract farming, basically, and how a written agreement can happen between the producer and buyer so that the uncertainties in the market can come down. This is what government is talking about around this. Third is Essential Commodities Act. This amendment to the Essential Commodities Act. Just to give you a background, in 1955, when this Essential Commodities Act came in, when there is a crisis and then when there is a food shortage, hoarding was seen as a serious problem. So some of the conditionalities were brought in at that time. So the current amendment defines new parameters for regulating of this. So it removed certain conditions which were there as part of the Essential Commodities Act. These are the three farm bills. Coming to the Essential Commodities Act, like Devinder ji has mentioned, over a period of time, there is a lot of changes which has already happened with the APMC. So buying outside APMCs is a reality. It's not. It is not new. So not something which is newly happening. It is already happening significantly across the country. 21 states have already amended their act, their state APMC acts, and allowed purchases outside the market. But this is not very well governed. Only governance system we have today is the mandi tax. I'll come to the mandi tax, what it means and all. Except for that, there is no governance of the markets outside APMCs as on today.
We've lost Ramu. Devinderji, if you can just continue with these while we try and get Ramu's connection back. I just like us just to continue. So we start with that the first act, and I'll actually start with a question that if 21 states have amended their act, so this is a union government law, and it's applied at the state level. Is that correct?
No. The APMC Act is a state act. See, in India, agricultural marketing is a state subject. So every state has its own approach to marketing. So among the states which had APMC acts, 21 states have modified APMC acts and then allowed purchases outside APMCs. And 7 states doesn't have APMC Act. Some have repealed it, and some have some didn't have at all. Say Bihar never repealed it. Kerala, Manipur, and Union territories like Andaman, Nicobar, Daman and Diu, and Lakshadweep, they never had. So among the major agricultural.
Okay, we're losing you again, Ramu. There's some problem with the audio. Okay, Vinyasa, could you have a look at Ramu's audio? And Devinderji, we turn to you now. Question is, if this is a state-run thing, then why is it that this is a union government act? Sorry, Union Government Act, this one, law number 1.
Well, I think this is quite clear from what Ramu mentioned. Agriculture is a state subject, but over the years, not only agriculture, there are various other areas which are state subjects are being now taken over, quote unquote, by the central government, and that federalism kind of approach that the country witnessed all these years is now gradually, disappearing and or is gradually being tampered with. And there is a huge issue here also, because states like Punjab have objected to the center's intrusion into agriculture, and that is why they have enacted their own 3 laws to ensure that the laws remain in their, or the agriculture remains in their custody or in their area of operation. Now, this is something which I think shouldn't have been done. We should have allowed states the way we did it earlier, of course, was also not healthy. I remember when these laws, many states amended the laws, as Ramu mentioned, it came with the attachment that, if you amend these laws, this center would provide you so much of support, or the center will not provide you support if you don't amend these laws. So these kinds of coercion, the techniques that the government followed, I think was not fair enough. Many governments buckled under pressure and did that because there was support, financial support attached to these amendments. So that was one thing. But the fact that despite these amendments, the states were reluctant to reform as the center wanted, clearly showed that the understanding in the states was quite different from what the center was trying to enforce. And that is what I think was delaying the so-called reforms. And the government then utilized the lockdown period as an opportunity to push those reforms, quote unquote, again into the entire country by bringing in the central laws which supersede the state laws and so on. So I think that one factor we should.
Sorry for interrupting you. So you're saying the central law supersedes state law. That means whether they like it or not, states cannot continue with this APMC. They will have to repeal.
Because these laws are under trade. If you just see the law number 1, it is farmers produce trade and commerce. So very cleverly it has been drafted in a manner because trade is a central subject, whereas agriculture is a state subject. So actually infringe on agriculture marketing, but utilize trade as the cash point or the cash.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the second one, Devinderji. Then, so it's law number 2. It's empowerment and protection. What is this about?
Yes, the language, keep apart the language, but I think a more important thing, this is a law for contract farming, which says that the contracts in India, you can now take a contract for 5 years, you can prefix the price for 5 years, and that is being sold as if it is a great advantage to the farmer. He'll get a higher price. He can already in advance know what the price is going to get for the next couple of years. And if there is a dispute, which normally happens in the case of contracting parties, then it is the power that would rest with the farmers to go to the courts has been taken away, and he goes to the SDM, the sub-divisional magistrate, and then who forwards a kind of a committee, and then they look into the grievance, and then that goes to the deputy commissioner, and then goes to financial commissioner. The point is, it is a bureaucratic process that they have spelled out in that, and the farmers were, of course, told not to move to the. They were barred from going to the or moving to the courts, and this is one of the opposition by the farmers that how they can be deprived of facilities by the court or legal recourse, because SDM, let's say he is faced with a company called Adani on one side and the poor farmers on the other side. I think it will be very difficult to look into this situation where the SDM would be siding with the farmers and so on. So that was the farmers' objection. Eventually, the government in its negotiation did agree to allow farmers to go up or to use the court channel. But the another interesting part is that in these, it is said very empowerment and protection agreement on price assurance. Now, the question of price assurance, what price are we assuring is very important. Farmers are saying that everything should be at the minimum support price at least. Now, companies are not agreeing to. They are saying that we want to pay farmers a higher price. Now, the question is higher price to what? We have to have a benchmark. If potato is selling at, let's say, 4 rupees a kilo, and you have you agree on a contract which is 5 rupees, whereas the procurement price may be 10 rupees. So I think farmers has got a higher price according to the companies, but let's be very clear that against MSP, he is again selling at a distressed price. So the farmers want MSP to be the benchmark here for price assurance.
Mm-hmm. So just for the viewers to know, MSP is the minimum support price. So the reason it was introduced was to make sure that the farmers got some sort of a minimum support price. In developed countries, it's called a minimum wage. It's different, but it's just we don't sell below that price. So as Devinderji has just said, when we say price assurance, what benchmark are we using to say price assurance? So is it from here or is it from here? What are we using? So there's one other thing that before we come, Ramu is back. Devinderji, we have had experience with contract farming in Punjab. Could you just tell us in a few words what this experience has been so far?
Well, for a number of years, farmers did go for contract farming in Punjab, but ask any farmer and he says he has burnt his finger, he doesn't want to go in it. Go into it again. Of course, the problems and challenges remain. First of all, as I said about the price assurance, even there when the farmers contracted, I give you one example. Baby corn was a contract farmers had with a multinational company in Punjab. It purchased baby corn from Punjab farmers or those farmers, contract farmers at 7 rupees a kilo, and sold it at retail at the wholesale at 100 rupees a kilo, and that was sold eventually at 200 rupees a kilo in the retail. So if you look at the retail price of 200 rupees a kilo, what the farmer got was 7 rupees a kilo, or 7 or 8 between that. And this is what the companies would say was a price assurance to the farmers. This is what the farmers' income has gone up with, and so on and so forth. But eventually, if you look at it, farmer share was negligible, I would say. I don't know, 200 rupees, 7 would be less about 3% or 4%. Now, that is not the kind of farm income that the people are looking forward to, and that is why farmers in Punjab are very wary of contract farming, and that is one subject here. But yes, on the other hand, the land holdings are getting smaller and smaller. So the aggregating these small land holdings or building a kind of a cooperative and so on would be another alternative that the farmers are suggesting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Can I just remind the viewers also that the Green Revolution did not come cheap for the farmer. The farmers have taken large loans to be able to, even though they get subsidies, this was not a cheap technology for farmers in India. And the debt, because they were under so much debt, is one of the reasons why so many of them committed suicide. Let's come back now to Ramu. Ramu, you're back. Thank you. Can you please cover law number 3? What is this amendment to the Essential Commodities Act?
Again, the Essential Commodities Act was brought in 1955 when there is a supply is low and then the demand was high. One of the conditionalities was put in terms of how much can be stored, and on essential commodities like cereals, pulses, potatoes, onions, edible oils, and oil. So when the restriction was put in 1955, the situation was very different. So today that conditionality is used mostly by the bureaucrats and the agencies to twist small traders, because big traders anyway get over all these issues easily. Small traders, farmer producer organizations, all. So one of the requirement many times asked for the government was making an amendment to this to allow stocking, so basically storage. The government amended this Essential Commodities Act to allow storage, and then so current restrictions which are there as part of the Essential Commodities Act doesn't exist. So you don't need to take a permission from the government in terms of for storage, but price caps will be triggered only when the price raised by 100% for horticulture produce and 50% for non-perishable items. This is what the law says. And what we have seen over a period of time till date, Essential Commodities Act is used only in 2 conditions. One, when the consumer price rises, so always the government intervened and then tried to snap the market prices. We have seen last month also when the onion prices have increased, government tried to step in and then cut down the market prices. So they imposed restrictions on the stock holding on the onions. This is what has happened. And then farmers were getting around 40 rupees a kg kind of price at that point of time. And the prices went down in the market. So always the Essential Commodities Act was used against the farmers, not in favor of the farmers. So this is what the current law says, the current amendment says. So coming back to the previous 2 cases also, so when we talk about APMC amendments or when we talk about contract farming agreement, like I mentioned, much of the changes have already happened, and that's the reality. So whenever we are talking about what would be the impact of the new laws, we need to look at from what is happening across the country and not from one situation. So, for example, APMC is providing better price. It's not a reality across the country. It's not actually APMC which is providing the price. It is the FCI which is providing the price. So wherever there is a procurement by FCI, people are getting better prices, and wherever there is no procurement happening, there is no prices for the farmers. That's the reality of it. So how do we deal with that is what we need to look at, not just about the APMCs. Second important issue about this is also about whenever we have the minimum support, when we talk about minimum support price is a market tool which we use when there is a price fall, and then to support when the price is falling, how do we deal with that so that it's a market intervention so that the market prices can be kept up. Like there's one approach for using the market supports, the minimum support price. Second, when you want to push for a particular crop or a particular practice into a new area, like the Green Revolution used it to promote the Green Revolution model of agriculture. So they used MSP as a tool kind of thing. So the market intervention scheme, but over a period of time, because of the high cost of production and then there is no market demand, the whole crisis led to a situation where minimum support price has happened. Minimum support price became the maximum support price for the farmers. That's the situation today. And so from there to move on, extending the same model of MSP and same model of procurement as it stands today will only create more crisis, is what we need to look into. And this also focus the focus on just 2 crops and then a few states led to a situation where in many states there is no procurement happening and then the market crisis. And post 2014, one of the important issue which has happened in the country is that the stocks are lying with the warehouses because there is an excess product procurement happening, and states also started procuring locally, so there is no takeoff from the central pool, and government started selling not only to the states for distribution through the public distribution system, but it is also subsidizing and selling to the corporates. So today corporates get grain at throwaway prices. Say for example, if you want to buy 100 quintals of rice, it is available at 2,700 rupees in any of these FCI godowns. So obviously they can sell it at 30 to 40 rupees in the market, and that is causing distortion in the market, and then many states are unable to sell in the market. Say for example, today Telangana, we have a lot of rice which is coming into the market, but we are unable to sell in the market because the market prices are dipped. So that's the situation. So we need to look at the changed scenario. So the minimum support price, the FCI operations in one area, and then focus on few crops for the situation when we had less supply and more demand. And these today we are in a situation where the situation has changed. So I think that's where we need to look at how new protection systems, new safeguards can be built in. Similarly, coming back to the contract farming thing, we are one of the organizations trying to follow up on this contract farming act, because in Telangana, many farmers got affected because of this contract farming. There is a seed companies. Telangana produces nearly 50 to 60% of the seed which India buys. And there is a contract farming, but contract farmings are never registered. So there's no registration. Though law says it has to be registered with APMC, and then there is no arbitration mechanism. So one of the asks we always had was that there should be an arbitration mechanism local level where collector can intervene and then resolve the issue. And so that's one of the asks that came in as part of this contract farming law. But as Devinder rightly mentioned, there should also be an opportunity for the farmers to move to the courts if it cannot be resolved at the district level. And but at the same time, we also need to think of if it's not only farmer who may move to the court, but the company also may move to the court. So if the company moves to the court, what is the protection for the farmers? So that's from that point is what we need to look at. So essentially, these 3 laws I would say from my experience and then my analysis, or most of them are already happening, but without writing. So this was one attempt to actually make it in writing. But certainly states' rights are not taken away. Say Punjab making its own law, or Madhya Pradesh saying we won't allow produce from other states are happening. So states, it doesn't take away the state's role, or it doesn't take away the MSP operations. It doesn't take away the APMC's role. But certainly they may get weakened because that's not part of this law, but it's a governance issue and the intentions of the government. And in a situation where people lost trust on the government, particularly over a period of time, successive governments have let down farmers. This whole uprise and the protest, what we are seeing is from that context is what we need to look at.
Thank you so much, Ramu. One of the points I want to bring about is the gene revolution led to this concept of monocropping. So what is monocropping? Which is, it is easy to grow, in theory, more food if you can control it. So it's all, we're always trying to control. It's a very sort of technocratic approach to agriculture. So if you want to grow high yielding varieties, they need water. You need to have the seed, which is all uniform. Then you need to apply fertilizers and pesticides, and you have monocropping. So this is what started to happen in Punjab. In Bollywood films, you see, all this beautiful mustard seed, or you see all this wheat or rice, and we've kind of glorified it. But actually what it did was, it was very destructive to the soils and to the water of the state. So in time, monocropping meant that yields have come down. So Devinderji, could you please talk to us a little about monocropping and the problems of that, genetically modified agriculture, and how that is different from Green Revolution? Because Green Revolution was still funded by the state. Gene Revolution is being funded, not funded, it's being run by the private sector. Risks are being taken by the farmer. And if you could explain that to us, monocropping, Gene Revolution, and in that also, please tell us what happened with PepsiCo and potato farmers. Thank you.
Well, I think, Jagjit, if you allow me to continue with the earlier subject first, I think it needs a little bit of more elaboration. Yes. And the part that you are mentioning now, monoculture and Gene Revolution and so on, these three laws would actually be exacerbating that kind of a crisis in India. These companies who are not coming to set an ecological balance or to bring in agroecological agriculture and so on. They will be on a rampage like what they have done globally. Let's be very clear about it. So let us not diffuse the entire thinking or the crisis that we have by bringing up these kinds of issues, which in any case are going to be a serious problem in the days to come. And let's be very prepared for it. Nobody, when the laws came up in India, 3 laws came up of India, these issues were not thrown up. It is only when the Punjab farmers brought up the issue of assured price that the nation started talking about the entire gamut of issues concerning agriculture. Now that is something I think where we must divide or provide a divider so that we don't confuse or we don't dilute the particular demand of farmers. Why I'm saying this is, for the last 7, 8, 9 decades, I have seen American agriculture in the grip of what is called open-ended reforms or open market reforms. And in 1960s, since 1960s, the chief economist of US Department of Agriculture, he has gone on record recently saying that since 1960, the farm prices in America, real farm prices in America, if you adjust for inflation, have been on a steep decline. This is in a country where we are borrowing and cut and paste this model of reform in India. This is a country where the average land holding size is about 444 acres. In India, the 86% of the farmers have less than 5 acres. Now, the point I'm trying to make is when we see what has happened in America all these decades, I think there is a lesson to be drawn from it. There is a lesson to be drawn from it. Let us not repeat the mistake which America has done. Let us not repeat the mistakes which European Union has committed, or let us not repeat the mistakes which Australia has committed. Look at Australia. It has a land holding size of more than 4,000 hectares. Now, that is the land holding size in Australia. And yet, farmers are committing suicide in Australia also. I remember one of the presidents of the farmer unions of Australia a couple of years back had made a statement saying, we are tired of subsidizing the country. Enough is enough. That is what Australian farmers were saying. This is what Indian farmers are saying. This is what American farmers are saying. And this is what the markets have done to agriculture all over the world. And we are somehow very fascinated, or we romanticize that markets will do wonders for agriculture. I think that's a question we need to first look into it, if you allow me to say that. Why I'm saying this is that when Ronald Reagan was the president of America, this is in mid-80s, when Mrs. Indira Gandhi was the prime minister in India, almost at that time. Ronald Reagan's agriculture secretary had made a statement that in America, the big get big, the small should go out. Get big or get out was his slogan. That was a very infamous slogan that we must know. Get big or get out. And that is what American farmers did. Then let us look at Donald Trump's, agriculture secretary. He has said that in America, the big get bigger, the smaller go out. Today, 1.5% of American population is left in agriculture today. And agriculture, America is the biggest producer of agriculture in the world. We also know that because it's the corporates who do agriculture in America. Then let's look at another study. I want to bring it up. All these years, while we are talking of market efficiency in America, competitiveness, which has driven the market prices and all those things that we hear, it is very interesting to find out that every 5 years, America brings a farm bill. That farm bills actually provides you makes a provision of subsidies that have to be given in the next 5 years. And if you look at those phenomenal subsidies, you will realize that the American agriculture actually thrives on those subsidies and yet is in a crisis. Where are those markets? There's no APMC there. There's no MSP there. There is, no stock limit on Walmart and so on. There is commodity trading. There is contract farming. Then why are American farmers today saddled with a bankruptcy of $425 billion? $425 billion is ironically the same amount that America has pumped in its agriculture since 1995. In the last 25 years, they pumped in $425 billion, and yet they are saddled with, farmers are saddled with a bankruptcy of $425 billion. The rate of suicide in rural America is 45% higher than urban America. Look at the spate of suicide, and then let us look at the technology also they bring in. In the small dairy farms, if you look at it, then America had a huge number of dairy farms and all technologically rich, sophisticated, and so on. What happened? In the last 10 years, 17,000 dairy farms have closed down in America. There's a study which shows that since 1970, 93% of dairy farms in America have closed down. They have closed down because the prices crashed. Farmers were left with no choice. They had to close down. Many committed suicide and so on. Now, and yet America's milk production has gone up. America's milk production has gone up because of the entry of big players, corporates, into milk production. So small farmers go out, corporates enter. This is what has happened in a country like America. Now, to say that this wonderful model will work in India, I think is a fallacy. I think we need to start questioning this model, that if it did, and look at the devastation it has also done to what you are calling the industrial agriculture's devastation to ecology, agriculture, environment, and so on and so forth is there before us. And yet we are refusing to learn a lesson. We think that, that the corporates have all the answers for our problems. The answer is no. I think why can't India, and also before I go to that, let's also look into another factor. A 2000 study, Untitled India, it is the India branch of Untitled, which had done a study which said that if you withdraw the green box subsidies under WTO, you know that every WTO ministerial has a bone of contention on agriculture subsidies the rich countries provide. And in 2008, the rich countries provided $246 billion of subsidies, the OECD countries. Europe alone gets $100 billion of subsidies every year as to farmer support. Much of it is in direct income support to farmers. And yet, I remember attending a meeting in the UK Food Group London some years back, where it was said that one farmer quits agriculture in Europe every minute. Now, if this is the situation in Europe, I gave you the situation in America. As far as agriculture exports are concerned, the Untitled India study had shown that if you withdraw the green box subsidies, agriculture exports from America, Canada, and European Union fall by 40%. which means even the agriculture exports are not competitive, quote unquote. Markets are not doing a wonderful job there. They are being sustained, or they are thriving on massive agriculture subsidies that the state provides. And the state has no problem providing subsidy support to the corporates, because it is always socialism for corporates and capitalism for farmers. So farmers in America are quitting agriculture, Europe they are quitting agriculture, Canada they are quitting agriculture, Australia they are quitting agriculture, and we are believing that markets will do wonders in India. I think we need to take an entire re-look at that, sit on the table, understand what the damage it has done to the globe. Do we have an answer to come out of our crisis? The answer is yes. We have the strengths in India. Why do we have to borrow from a failed model, as I said earlier, also from America and Europe? We can build on our own strengths. Now, let me give you one or two strengths here, Jagjit, for you to all appreciate. MSP is, if it is not extended across the country, it is not the fault of farmers. Farmers didn't, farmers don't even know. I remember Sharad Pawar, when he was the agriculture minister, and this is something around 2007, 2008, he made a statement that 71% farmers in India do not even know what MSP is. They have never heard of MSP. They don't even understand what the concept of MSP is. They are happy with the prices they are getting. I don't know, happy or unhappy, whatever you say. And look at Assam, for instance. I give you the figure. 4.2% is the rice production as far as Assam is concerned of the total country's rice production. And only 0.02 is the procurement of rice. People there in Assam don't even know what MSP is all about. Why the people are protesting outside Delhi? They don't understand, because they have never been exposed to what the merits of MSP is. My argument is, if Punjab farmers are getting a higher price, I think that's the higher price I want the rest of the country also to get. Why should we leave it to the markets, that market's benevolence? Sorry, there's never been a market benevolence. If it suits them, you can get a higher price today. But otherwise, they will always keep, or always like to borrow or buy material at a cheaper price from you or from the farmers. Now, look at America. The USDA has come out with a report talking about food dollars. What the farmer share in a dollar that a consumer spends is 8%. 8% is what the farmer is getting in America, where the landholding size is 444 acres. And look at India. In India, Amul is a classical example. Amul is a cooperative dairy model. We all know that. Amul, at least when you buy Amul milk for 100 rupees, farmer gets 70 rupees out of that, which means 70% is the farmer share. Now, please tell me, if in Amul you can do that, why can't you do that across board in other crops also? Why can't you expand that Amul model to crops like vegetables, to pulses, to oil seeds, and so on and so forth? We can do that.
I have a question for you. I have a question for you right there. So if Amul could do it, why can't farmers in Punjab process their food? Is there something that stops them?
The point is that if you have to see, Amul was an initiative that the government took, Kurian took, we all know that, NDDB was formed later, but that has been a substantive support from the government. You are bringing these 3 laws, why can't you bring in one more laws, or remove these 3 laws actually, bring in a set of 3 laws, another set of 3 laws which India needs. One law, we announce price for 23 crops every year, which covers 80% of the gross crop area of the country. This is the MSP that the government announces. Predominantly, we buy wheat and paddy only. The rest of it doesn't matter. It's just a kind of a benchmark that we have created. Now, why can't we ensure that MSP becomes a legal right? It means there's no trading below that particular price. I give you one example. October, November, if you look at the government's own portal, Wire has come out with the analysis of that. It had said that in October, November, across all crops, Indian farmers lost 1,900 crore rupees for not getting MSP. If they had actually sold at MSP, or MSP was a legal right, they would have earned 1,900 crores more just in 2 months. Now, why are we opposed to that? I don't understand that. If we can get an assured salary every month, why can't the farmers get an assured price? I think there's nothing wrong in that. The old system, traditional system, must go away with. It has done enough damage to the world. Let us create our own model. Let the world look up to India as a new model to follow. The model that we can provide to the rest of the world. And I'm sure farmers everywhere in the world would be very happy if they get an assured income or assured price for their crops. What is wrong in that? Now, to say that, oh, we don't have that money, that's an argument. We don't have money if we start purchasing from procuring. I'm not saying you start procuring from everybody. I'm saying you raise the benchmark. When you raise the benchmark, let me illustrate it. Kerala has come out with a pricing policy for vegetables. it has said for 16 vegetables, they have fixed a floor price, which is cost of production plus 20%. It may be still lower, but at least there is some floor price. Cost of production plus 20%. And then they have said, set aside 35 crore rupees for this. A journalist was interviewing me the other day, and he said they didn't mean it. That is why they have just kept 35 crores. They are not spending it. But if you look into what Kerala says, it says the prices are already ruling over that floor price. They don't have to invest. They only have to step in when the prices fall. So this assumption that, yes, this assumption that, government will have to procure everything is a kind of a fear psychosis being created by the market economists. And I always say market economists are lazy economists. Just cut and paste, leave it to the markets, get fantastic salaries yourself. I want to know which economist in the world whose salary is linked to markets. Let them link their salaries to the markets, and they will get to know how devastating markets can be. Why do you leave it to?
Absolutely, at a time when we are facing unprecedented climate change and this COVID crisis, which has brought this sector to its knees. This is another thing. How these laws were, we haven't even got to that. But I have a question for you from one of our participants. And if you answered that, then we'll go back to Ramu, please. Just before I come to the question, Devinder ji, and thank you very much for all that. When the WTO Agreement on Agriculture came into being, that is what Devinder ji has been talking about. At that time, after the Western countries had followed the WTO rules, they were allowed to subsidize their agriculture by $1 billion a day. $1 billion a day. And I think you were the one who coined the term that European cattle were getting $2 subsidy. Yes, you've coined that term. I remember. So the cows were getting more subsidy than human beings were allowed. Now, India was not allowed to move above that. So on top of India sits this huge umbrella of the WTO as well, not to mention these free trade agreements that are coming around left, right, and center. So the question for you, Devinder ji, is why, so it says, are these farm bills affecting all farmers and all consumers in the same way? And following on from that, is this a Punjab protest or is this an all India protest? In fact, I would say it's a worldwide protest, but anyway, yes. This whole thing, this is all about Punjab. They've just made it all about, without looking at this complex picture.
See, we must understand, and I think I did mention somewhere, and if somebody had got the answer, that, why it is a Punjab-dominated protest, because Punjab farmers have, over the last 5-6 decades, have been given a price assurance by way of minimum support price. And the average income of a Punjab farmer today, according to one of the studies, is about 20,000 rupees a month. And one predominant reason is, of course, a higher MSP farmers get. 56,000 crores is what flows into Punjab by way of MSP every year. Now, 56,000 crore is a huge amount. Even if you were to reduce some of it and leave it to markets, imagine the loss farmers are going to incur. And that is why they understand it's a life and death question for them. So they are they have dug in New Delhi, and they are going to stay there. If you see the reports, they say even we are going to stay there for 4 years or 3 years or whatever you want. And the society is coming out in support of those farmers. Now, why not in other states? I gave you the answer. When 71% farmers do not know what is MSP, they don't even know the merits of MSP. So they have never actually got, okay, this is going to benefit them and so on and so forth. So it is not because Punjab farmers are only concerned about it. I think every one of us would be concerned of it. If you and me were the salaries to be slashed to half what we are getting, we would also start protesting. But perhaps the daily wage workers will not protest the way we are doing it. So I think anyone who has been at that level would understand what it means to get that kind of income. A. B. Let's go to Bihar. Let's look into Bihar. I remember in 2006, there was excitement in India. They says Bihar is going to be the future role model of a market-driven agriculture in India. It's a harbinger. It's going to be a harbinger of a new revolution in India. Move away from Punjab now. Bihar is the new face of India agriculture and so on and so forth. What the government had done was it had thrown away APMC Act, and it had actually been very excited that, we are going to have private investments coming in. We're going to have private trade coming in. We're going to have private mandis coming in, and then we will have price discovery. 14 years have passed. A generation has been lost practically. And what has happened? Bihar still provides for a country with farm labor. That's what it has been providing so far. Imagine Bihar labor coming and working in Punjab. I have not seen Punjab workers, Punjab people going and working as farm labor in Bihar. Even in this paddy season, which has just ended, 50 lakh tons of paddy has come from Bihar to be sold in Punjab, all the way in Punjab. Why? Because Punjab gives a minimum support price of 1888 rupees per quintal. In Bihar, farmers sell at 1,000 rupees or 1,200 rupees per quintal. Now, this may be companies may say, oh, we are providing farmers with a higher price if we give them, let's say, 1,300 rupees per quintal. But I think higher price to what? This is what I had said earlier. We need a benchmark, and the benchmark is minimum support price. So I would like a situation that when Bihar farmers also become equal to, let's say, Punjab farmers. Why should Punjab farmers be then pushed into a situation where they become like Bihar farmers? I think what the country needs to follow as far as economics is concerned, a model that Punjab has initiated. And that's what I said. The first point I suggested to you, Jagdeep, last time earlier this thing was a more cooperative structure to be spread across other crops, agriculture commodities. The second one was that make MSP a legal right across 23 crops, and that will be the real freedom for farmers when he knows that whether he sells in Hyderabad, whether he sells in Chandigarh, at least he will get the minimum support price. That's the kind of assurance we need in country. So these are the two strengths that we have got. Why do we follow failed models from other countries? Let's build up on our strengths and create a new model that the world should look up to.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that analysis. Ramu, response to that? And also, if we can now move towards our agriculture is not sustainable. So first of all, it's not sustainable from an income point of view. Number two, the soil, the land. So can you please tell us what you're doing and what other groups are doing?
So before getting into the discussion on ecological crisis which has been created, let me also clarify some of the things which Devinder has said. I think Devinder has fantastically put in the issues together. See, one of the things which is also happening, it is say the difference between AP, the Bihar and Punjab when we look at. We also need to see it is the FCI procurement between these two states, which is the difference. It is not the presence of market alone. It is not the presence of market yards alone.
Ramu, please explain. Please explain what the FCI is for those who do not understand what FCI is.
No, I'm coming to that. See, minimum support price, like what Devinder has explained, minimum support price is the price which the government announces for 23 crops, but it procures only 2 or 3 crops. It is not only 2 or 3 crops, it only procures from 2 or 3 states. That's the issue. They procure only from 2 or 3 states. Nearly 90% of entire grain is procured from 2 or 3 states. The rest of the states, they don't procure even. So government should procure from each state so that there is a market pool created. That actually helps the rest of the farmers getting the better price. I think that's a key issue. The issue is not just about market yards. Issue is about who is buying it, because APMC is only a platform. So in Bihar, it's a primary agriculture credit cooperative societies which procure. In Telangana, is the women self-help groups which procure. There could be PACs which is procuring in Andhra Pradesh. So every state has its own way of procurement. So who procures is not the issue. Who is the last end procurement? So it's not the APMCs, it's the FCI which created distortion. In some states, there's a high procurement. In many states, there is no procurement at all. So that created the price fall for the farmers. I think that is something which we also need to understand. What is the variance between these states? And number of experiments have been done in terms of trying out local procurement. So one of the fundamental shift probably we need is, say, government is today across the country. If you look at the biggest buyer is the government, nearly about 70 million tons. So there's no single buyer who buys 70 million tons in this country. And it's the FCI which buys 70 million tons, which government of India buys. If 70 million tons have to be procured from the country, distribute across the country. Let the states decide what is their priority. I think that's a fundamental thing, as very rightly mentioned about Kerala example. Kerala has a deficit of rice, deficit of vegetables. It came up with its own policy. Let every state has its own policy of where they use the support prices. Let's not have a centralized mechanism of procurement and distribution. This is exactly like the way you were created. So you procure from one place, very highly subsidized in one or two places, and dump it in the rest of the places where the prices fall. I think that model doesn't work. Let's move into a decentralized model. I think that's the first thing I would say. Second important issue, our model is fantastic model which succeeded, and Amul succeeded because there is a lot of public investment. Like exactly the way Green Revolution was dumped onto other states without putting in the same support systems, the government of India is talking about creating farmer producer organizations across the country, but without creating the kind of support systems which created for Amul. So you're saying just farm a cooperative, I'll support you with a very meager amount of money, and then you go and fight the market. It's not going to work. So I think building the farmer producer organizations so that the bargaining power of the farmers goes up, and then they become the front line where farmers can aggregate and then improve their bargaining power either to the government or to the markets can happen. I think that's the second important thing we need to look at. So decentralized procurement, make investments in terms of strengthening public market yards, also make investments in terms of strengthening farmer producer organizations, build infrastructure facilities that can help. Let state decide what to procure, what to produce, and then use this as a tool to increase the market quality of the produce. I think that's what we need to look at. So today we are in a situation where it is not corporatization versus government. I think it should be corporatization versus cooperatization, and where government invests. So government investment should get into cooperatives. It should invest in directly with the farmers and then build their strengths. I think that is which we need to look into. And yeah, so I think that's what is the need of the hour. So we need to create new laws, certainly, and new tools we need to create. Like Devinder was always saying about farmers' income security. I think that should be the main focus. And prices will not do that. Prices will not do that. Directly focus on the farm household income. Put in more efforts in terms of strengthening household income security. I think that should be the main focus. Some states have already began about direct income support models, and then we need to create more such models and then look at how farmers' household income security can be ensured, and create direct support mechanisms to the farmers so that, and then create protection mechanisms in terms of strong cooperatives like Amul, then they can compete with Nestle or somebody else. So Indian dairy industry would not have competed with the corporate dairy if Amul kind of models were not there, Vijaya kind of model. See, much is talked about Amul, but there are a number of such dairies across the country which have been built in. So all that cooperative dairy movement which has happened in India happened because a strong movement towards cooperativization was done. So I think that's a model we need to look into. So invest there. So public investment should go more into building cooperatives, building equitably distributing subsidies, and equitably distributing the procurement operations. If these three things can be done, I think that's a new approach we need to take, and then invest in the income security. Say today, hunger is because there is no incomes. There is no income because there are no prices. There are no prices because the market is disturbed. And government procurement is not helping on that. Just one or two crops they procure and then they distribute. See, much of the poverty, where does the poverty lies? It lies in the rural areas where actually they produce food. What is the point in distributing rice to the people who are actually producing it? What is the point of distributing wheat to the people who are actually producing it, or in the process of producing it? So we need to move away from what we have done for the 70 years. So the kind of procurement operations, the kind of models which we had in terms of subsidy schemes, all these, I think we need to make shift. We need to look at how do we strengthen community organizations? How do we shift towards more ecologically sustainable models of agriculture? And then how do we drive farmers to take a better decision? It's not the investments, it's not the subsidies which should drive the farmers to grow a particular crop or a particular practice. It should be the farmers, their need, state, their need. It's not the center which should decide or the subsidy which should decide. I think that's what I would say. That's a fundamental shift which we need to come up with in the farming policy. So let's look at this as a watershed of various protests happened in this country, across the country. So just to answer you, it is not the Punjab farmers who are protesting. Across the country, there is an unrest. They might not have identified with the demands which people have made. Otherwise, there is an unrest across the country. Tamil Nadu farmers protested for months together in Delhi. And when Tamil Nadu farmers were protesting, you might have seen, Telangana farmers protested, Maharashtra farmers protested, Odisha farmers protested. So protests are happening against their own situation, their own conditions. Sugarcane farmers in Karnataka has protested. So this is happening. So how do we solve this problem? We cannot have one solution. We cannot have one solution. We cannot have one market in this country. We should have million markets in this country. So trying to centralize it is the problem, and government did it all these years. Government did actually aggregate, government hoarded the grains, governments dumped it, and then it's a very inefficient government. So let's move towards strengthening the cooperatives, building the farmers' institutions, and then see how they can pitch in against the kind of markets which they need to deal with. And most efficient market, decentralized market. If the farmers at the district level, if they can sell most of their produce, that's the best thing. At the state level, if they can meet the state needs, it's the best thing. Rest of it can go to the rest of the place. I think that's what we need to look at. If we have to produce for America, if you have to produce for Australia, I think we are going to lose. So I think we should look at how large part of the production focuses on the local requirements and then local needs. And then from there, actually, we need to become. So the entire agricultural policy had to make a fundamental shift, is what I would say. Decentralized procurement, decentralized decision-making, and building the community institutions. I think that's a fundamental shift one need to look at.
I see. Ramu, thank you so much. Devinder ji, do you have a response to that? Decentralized model, huge investments in farmer producer organizations. I mean, I was just thinking about this question I asked you about why the milk is not being, why the wheat and well, even dairy is not being processed in Punjab. The thing is, the incentives are just not there. The incentives, the government center buys all that, right? And so if they were able to actually process it within Punjab and then export it where they want it. I didn't know this, but even the infrastructure is not there. For instance, to be able to fly that produce out and stuff like that. There just hasn't been the incentives.
Well, I think there is no denying that agriculture is in the need of serious reforms, and reforms don't essentially mean privatization. Yes, there is a need for reforms, and reforms across the spectrum. I would say at various steps we need to reset the balance that has gone wrong in agriculture, and we have all been talking about it. But my point is one: when the government brought in the 3 laws, I didn't see any call for reforms. I didn't see anybody talking about, oh, we need to set agriculture policy now good or in a manner that it is beneficial for agriculture in the long term and so on. It's only when the Punjab farmers began the protest that now we are talking about, oh, let's use this opportunity to bring in fundamental reforms and so on and so forth. The point I'm trying to make is that what these central laws are going to bring in would be a much serious devastation to all those kind of things that we want agriculture to be looking up to. So, but there was no talk at particular time. When in June the ordinances came, till September when the protest began in a big way in Punjab, I didn't see any kind of debate at the political level or at the academia level or intellectual level that we need to now look into these reforms in the light of what agriculture needs in India. It was never discussed. Or let's say even if it was discussed at some small meetings, I don't know, but generally it was outside the purview of the general public. Now the point I'm trying to make is Punjab farmers brought up a point. They are now very clear about it that actually everything, whatever reform you want to follow, everything comes down to what is your total, final net income at the end. Let's be very clear. Whether you go by privatization or by government and so on, it is your net income at the end which matters to every one of us. Whether you are in one university, I am in another university, each one of us is looking at his particular income also. Let's not forget about that. So that is very important. So it's important for farmers also. If the farmers today are saying that we need an assured income, why do we, whether it is by way of hundreds of markets or whether it's way of one market, that's a different question. But the farmer should get an assured income is what all I'm saying. If they are demanding it, they're right in saying something which they have not been given or denied all these 5, 6, 7 decades, at least that we know of, is a correction that we need to do. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that yes, we need to set the balance right in agriculture. We all agree. We need, as you would point out too, we need sustainable agriculture. We need agroecological agriculture. We need what Center for Sustainable Agriculture has been pushing us or making us, believe or see the merits of that agroecological system. So we need to follow all those things, but it has to be done in the context of the bigger policy changes that the government is bringing, which means we must at least wake up the government to start looking into those things also. The private sector is not going to do that. I will put it in a big letters. They are not going to do that. Their objective is only, which you mentioned in your initial presentation when you began the webinar, when you showed the concentration. Look at the concentration. The companies have, agro-business companies have grown up with all these decades. That is what they are heading towards. The Reliance or the Ambanis or ITC or whatever in India is not coming here to help the farmers. They are actually coming here to build up their own empire, because now, internationally, even financial markets are finding it difficult to sustain themselves. So therefore, you are moving into land. From land, you are moving into agriculture. Land was a few decades back, and now it is agriculture. So let us look into this commodification of agriculture that is taking place all over the world, and then see where the other mechanism fit in. The point is, even if the FPOs, the farmers producer companies, are helping farmers aggregate and are a kind of a bargaining chip, which is very important. But what is wrong if we ensure that the FPOs at least provide farmers with a minimum support price? Why shouldn't the farmers get a minimum support price? And if it has become universal that in the country, whether you are in Assam, whether you are in Punjab, whether you are in Karnataka, everyone will get a minimum support price. You remember when the minimum wages thing came up, the company said, no, we can't. This will destroy our balance sheets and so on and so forth. But the debate continued. Today we have minimum wages, even in America, even in Australia, even in India, and so on. And the companies have reformed their balance sheets or reformed their business plan accordingly to adjust that. I'm sure the companies would adjust again if you were to ensure that there is a minimum price available to the farmers or given to the farmers. The companies who are into agriculture will start trading at that level. So the benchmark goes up. So let us not diffuse the crisis here, or the main point here, that we need to provide farmers with an assured income. And if Punjab farmers have woken up, it is for the rest of the farmers, rest of the country's farmers, who also understand that they have a voice now in the protest outside Delhi. And I think there are issues. I know of unrest happening in every part of the country for so many decades that I have been looking into. But that is what the government thought. There will be some unrest here, some unrest there, and everything will fall in line. But eventually, this time, Punjab farmers have shown that it is not going to be what used to happen. Imagine today, if you go to Delhi, around Delhi, where the farmers' protests are, people, not only food supplies, they are comfortable for the next 6 months. They will keep on getting their replenishment as far as food is concerned. Even some companies, some people have come and provided them, for foot massage machines, so that you can take rest and so on. People are coming up with, you can have free blanket there, you can have a free overcoat there. Everything is free. Undergarments are free. Toothpaste is free. Society wants to help the community. This culture of Punjabis, share and care, perhaps the rest of the country didn't know. I think we underestimated Punjab's, strength in this particular, area. And look at it today. If the Punjab farmers have dug in today, I think it is not only that, why only Punjab farmers? They are speaking the language for the rest of the country. They are the voice for the rest of the country. So what they are saying is, they are close to Delhi, yes, but they are speaking the language. And if they are saying farmers should get a assured price, whether it is 1,000 markets or whether million markets, what is wrong if each market provides farmers with an assured income? What is wrong in that? Absolutely. That is what to understand. You can have various mechanisms for that. There is no problem in that. But ensure that the farmer gets a minimum support price. Or
that person who produces our food, that man, woman who produces our food, farm laborers who are the most food insecure, farmers are the most food insecure world over, let's assure that they get a minimum income. That is, I think we should end with that really strong thought in our minds. Also, you're very right, Devinderji, that these farmers, they are the ones who brought these debates about. Their courage, their their spirit, I was about to say, they're relentless. They're like, we're going there and you can do what you want. Kar lo jo karna hai. We are enough is enough. And I've seen these images of them feeding the police. The police is sitting there having langar, eating there with them. And so the what they symbolize for the rest of the country is huge. And so can I just say, for the next minute, if we can just have some silence, just to give them some energy, and then we will end. If that's okay with everyone, we're going to start now. And in a minute, we will end the seminar. Let's give all the farmers protesting all over the country some energy. Okay, can I just thank our speakers so much today. I'm really indebted to you for the time you give us, for the understandings we get from you guys. You're there at the coalface, always there. It's not, I know for both of you, it's not about you. Never, it never has been. If it was, you would be doing other things. Thank you so very much. Ramu, Devinder, two of my favorite people that I work with, and I said with Devinder ji for 20 years I've been working, and so I'm just waiting for the borders to open so I can come back to India. To our audience, thank you so much for all your questions. We have noted them. I hope we've answered quite a lot of them. Could I please ask you, Devinder Sharma ji is very prolific, as you know, and has quite a lot of material out on the web. He's also written lots of books, lots of articles. So this, if some of the things were not clear to you, you can go and have a look at what he's written, particularly certain technical terms that were used. So Food Corporation of India, minimum support price, all those things, particularly if you are not from India. Ramu runs CSA, and CSA has an amazing website and an amazing team behind them, and you will get lots and lots of webinars on Facebook. They're very active, both of them. So you can go and get more information. You can send more questions to us. And if we can, definitely we will respond. You'll find me on the web too. I work at Monash University on sustainable and equitable agriculture. So thank you to everyone, and particularly to CSA for being so amazing. And Sat Sri Akal, Namaskaran, Namaste to everyone. And thank you so very much. So we are for 8 minutes over time, and have a beautiful.
Thank you, Jagjit.
Thank you,
Jagjit, and thanks, Devinder.
Yeah,
as usual, wonderful. Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Yeah, and I'm getting wonderful messages. So thank you so much. Bye bye, everyone.